Welcome to the field. Well, round 14, we saw a couple of the competition's best teams overcome seemingly hopeless deficits. Sydney, they did it, and I probably felt like they would and could, and they did behind the Amati party. Joel Amati kicked 9, if you don't mind. John Longmire took him to the bench. What about that, if you don't mind? John Longmire knows what it takes and feels like to kick 10, and he drags the big man and says, sit down. Not sure about that. And the Pies, I was at that game working on radio. What about that? What's about that? Personnel down, 54 points down, and they felt like they had no chance of coming back and being competitive in that game, let alone winning it. It was the game of the season as far as I'm concerned. It had everything, major controversy, and I'm sitting here on a Monday night. I've just heard the explanation from Laura Kane. Absolutely gobsmacked by it. Absolutely gobsmacked by it. I'll start there. Didn't have it in the script, but I'll tell you what, I just simply can't understand it. Now, what I will do, and this is quite rare for me, but I'll go back and I'll have an actual word-for-word read of what Laura Kane said. Now, first and foremost, she's probably protecting the umpires. She's probably trying to protect the umpires. But what I will say about the umpires is they are paid. And to my understanding, they're quite well paid. I think they should be paid more, and I think they should be paid a lot more. I think that can be said for all umpiring across most sports, because being an official, being a referee, an umpire, whatever you want to call them, is not necessarily that popular of a career choice. It's not a path that many go down. So make it more popular and make it more inducing by paying them accordingly. But they are well paid, AFL umpires. They're making good money. Therefore, I think warranted criticism is absolutely fair. But in this instance, Laura Kane has no doubt protected them because nothing else makes sense. Her statement, you've probably heard most of it by now, she said, quote, "It could be play on immediately or it could be stand, which would indicate the mark had been paid." Well, the mark was paid, Laura, because the umpire blew his whistle. And when a ball is kicked and then caught by a human on the other team, it's a mark. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that. Now, I've seen this replay 1,000 times, and it's a mark. Bailey Scott knows it's a mark. McCreary definitely knows it's a mark. Anyway, I'm sidetracked already. Laura goes on to say, neither of these two calls were made in the immediate moment after the free kick has been blown. And Bailey takes 4 steps or so inbound and looks to play on. I disagree with that. So the correct call should have been play on initially. I disagree with that. That has caused confusion for the players in the immediate vicinity. The Collingwood players, that there was a delay, whistle to message, and that communication was the error, I guess you could call it. End quote. Laura, I understand. I'll give you a tiny pass. If you are trying to protect the umpires, I'll give you a little pass. But the umpires are big boys and girls. The ball was kicked off the ground. It clearly travelled more than 15 metres. The umpire blows his whistle almost straight away. There's no significant delay there. He blows his whistle. He puts his hands up to clarify that it's a mark. Not that the Collingwood players see that, but McCreary and Steele at Sidebottom have played the game since they were kids. They understand when a ball is kicked by one player and caught by another, it's a mark every time. They clearly run straight over the mark, both of them, and are not penalised. Scott is basically forced to play on because he's panicking about losing time. He's not to know what's going on. Is the clock still running? Is the clock off? Now, in a calmer situation with the game not on the line, Scott's probably he's probably able to say, well, hang on, stop. This is 50. And he kind of does that. And then he thinks, well, I don't really have a lot of time here. I need to just get moving and get on with it. It was an absolute howler. There were howlers in that game all over the place. There's been howlers all season, but that was one where I can't believe they came out and tried to take us for fools. That's basically where I stand. Now, if Laura and the AFL are trying to protect the umpires, I kind of get it. But seriously, don't take us for fools. Some of us are, but not all of us are. It was absolutely staggering. Back to the Swans for a moment. They are so powerful and potent. They can put together 4, 5, 6 goal runs as you blink. They are as electric and as potent as we've seen. I almost want them to win the premiership now because they play the game the right way. They attack. They care about defending. They've always been a defend first team. And whilst they've got guys like Dane Rampy in their squad, they'll always be defend first. And John Longmire comes from that school of thought as well. But they attack and they play the game beautifully and gracefully and with power. And they're attacking you. As soon as they turn that ball over, whether it's Blakey, whether it's Ollie Florent, these guys are attacking you. McInerney wants to score as quick as he can. And you're starting to see guys like Joel Amati in the forward 50 do their thing. Amati's been a really rock-solid source of goals this season. I know the 9 goals is going to make a lot of us stand up, but he's been really consistent when it comes to kicking his 2s and occasionally 3s. He's had a pretty good season, and I guess the 9 goals absolutely emphasises that. Dustin Martin played game 300. It looked like a farewell party to me, and his comments at the end of the game with Jack Revolt may have led us to that point. I don't know, and I guess it doesn't really matter. We'll all find out together eventually, but what it was a great celebration of a really mercurial, brilliant, probably misunderstood superstar who's done his deeds in the biggest moments. 3 premierships, 3 grand finals, 3 best of fields, so 3 Norm Smith medals. I was victim to one of those. He just took over the game. He just knew and knows the moments probably as well as any player that certainly I've ever played against, but certainly anyone that's played the game in recent times. A guy like Gary Ablett is probably his nearest comparison in the past 10, 15 years, maybe Dangerfield. And maybe Dangerfield's a bit closer to Dusty than Ablett is. Ablett was almost death by 1,000 cuts. He has and always had the ability to do the miraculous, but he was consistently brilliant. He was brilliant on a consistent basis. I remember when he was playing for the Suns, our captain at the time, Nathan Van Berlo, tagged him and kept him to, I reckon, 30-2. And we were thrilled with that because Ablett was such a consistent ball winner, such a prodigious kick, such an accurate kick. He was going to kill you across 4 quarters if you let him get the ball 40 times. And that's what he did a lot. Dusty has never needed to get the ball 30-plus times. He's done it on occasion, but he only needs the ball 18 to 24 times to be the best player on the ground. And there aren't many who sit and live in that space. Marcus Bontempelli lives in that space. Nick Dacos can live in that space, but he gets the ball 30-plus times. There aren't many guys who can live in that space who can be the most damaging and impactful players in the competition, but only have the ball 18 to 23, 24 times. Dusty's always been that player. He was like that in his grand finals. I think he had 29 against us, perhaps, but in the grand final in Brisbane, that's the most dominant individual performance I've ever seen live. Maybe that I've ever seen ever on TV, live, played, whatever. He just took over that game. He identified every moment in that shortened game. He kicks the goal before halftime to keep the Tigers afloat, and then he takes over the game in the second half, and he puts an absolute stamp on it at the end. He shrugs the tackle from Dangerfield. He kicks the miraculous goal, and he ends it for the Tigers, and they win their 3rd. So congrats to him. I've never really had the opportunity to talk to him. He's not a big talker. He's not a big handshaker when he walks off. Doesn't really give a whole lot of eye contact. He just sort of does his thing and moves along, and good luck to him. Good luck to him. Sunday afternoon, not the Collingwood North Melbourne game. It was the game I expected to be more exciting and more thrilling. It was GWS and the Power, and it was anything but. It was a really lackluster game. Inaccuracy on both parts. Toby Green kicked 1 goal 5. Jesse Hogan kicked 1 goal 3. It was a really ugly performance, but the Giants just needed to get a win, and they got a win. So you bank the 4 and the Power. Most people who follow along, and thanks to those who have been watching, some record numbers for us last week on YouTube. We're only small. We're only just pushing along and growing organically, as they say. But Thanks to those who did tune in last week for our Contenders and Pretenders show. But I've been cold on Port Adelaide. I think they've got massive issues in their front half. They've now got some problems in their back half. I don't think, or I'm certain Alir, Radagalia and Zerk Thatcher are not working as well together as they once were. Burton's been in and out of the team. Dan Houston and Kane Farrell are probably the only mainstays in the back half of the ground, and they're both there for their rebound and their ball use, and their front half is an absolute mess. Dixon goes out of the team, looks sore, has been rested. He's been suspended in the Sandful. We'll see what happens there. Ollie Lord comes in. I like Ollie Lord. He looks really athletic. We haven't seen him at all this season before the weekend, so he's going to take some time. But you've really got two emerging players who are going to be really inconsistent in Lord and Georgiades. Georgiades was quite good on the weekend, but he's going to have, he's going to be quiet 2 in every 3 because he's a young forward coming off a long-term injury, and Lord's the same. You might get Lord's best efforts 1 in every 4 at this point in his career. So that leaves a lot on the shoulders of Todd Marshall, and he simply hasn't cut the mustard this year. He hasn't jumped out of the ground. He goes for a lot of marks with the T-Rex arms. He tries to mark the ball close to his body. Now, look, hand in the air. I was no Wayne Carey or Jonathan Brown when it comes to marking the ball, but I can understand. I can see what's happening in front of me. He does try and mark the ball in his hands, but close to his body a lot of the time. He lets the ball dip below his eye line as well, which can be problematic for him when that ball's just dipping below his eye line and he's still trying to mark it in his hands. And he's been inaccurate. And that's the one thing he has been able to rely on earlier in his career. He's been so inaccurate in recent weeks, or pretty much all season. So he's had a disappointing season. Zach Butters, he gets done for a strike he'll most likely miss, I think, at time of recording. Anyway, he's been suspended. So no good for Port. They've got a massive game at home against Brisbane this weekend. That'll be an absolute beauty. But let's get back to the game of the season. I haven't watched every game from start to finish, but any game that was of substance, I've made sure that I've seen, either live or in review. But this game on Sunday, North Melbourne and Collingwood, was the game of the season. And the Never Say Die Pies, I tell you now, you got to admire them. Now, I claim to be neutral. I know I played at Adelaide and Geelong, but I don't sit there and barrack and cheer hard for either of those two teams. If they get beaten, I just sort of, it is what it is. Shake my head and move along. Doesn't worry me. So I don't really feel like I've got a dog in any fight. But when I watch Collingwood, I can't help but love the way they go about it. I went to the ground thinking, I wonder what Collingwood have got for me today. I probably expect North Melbourne to struggle, but I wonder what the Pies can do for me today. And I'll tell you what, their ability to come back from 54 points down with the caliber of player out that they had out, and you know the names, DeGoey, Pendlebury, Myercheck, and on and on and on. That is as admirable as you'll see. Some of the young players stood up when they weren't standing up in the first half, and their stars stood tall. Bobby Hill was electrifying. Lachie Schultz really came alive, kicked 4 goals, and he looks like he might be able to play that role as a close-to-goal, pseudo 5'10" small forward in the way Jamie Elliott has done over the past couple of years. Craig McRae seemingly gives Elliott a license to detach himself from the rest of the team, to stay close to goal and be a full forward, if you like. And that's what Schultz was able to do at different stages. He didn't camp and live inside forward 50. He got some of his goals working back and then hitting up at the ball and outworking his opponent back to goal. So I liked what he was able to do. Bobby Hill just took over. He was just too good against an inferior opposition. And Braden Maynard in his 200th game, congrats to him. He had some massive moments late in that game. Now the tag. So young Phillips tagged, he tagged Nick Dacos. It's the toughest thing to do in footy. Now, from a numbers point of view, again, twice in one episode, I've gone to the phone. So if I have a look at the numbers for both players, or particularly for Dacos, as I'm in the VFL stats, you won't be finding Nick Dacos' numbers in the VFL anytime soon. So Dacos ends up with 29 and 2 goals too. He has a big last quarter, but he's the man that went with him for much of the game for 3/4 was Will Phillips. And Alistair Clarkson has been criticised for subbing him out of the game, whether it was complacency, they thought the job was done, whatever it may be. In my personal view, I think Phillips was absolutely redlining from a physical point of view. I watched him trying to follow, and he was following Dacos everywhere. Dacos was not having to defend or join in team defence because Phillips was beside him, even when the Roos had the ball. And he was chasing and trying to stick with Dacos. And Dacos was like a shark. He could sense young Phillips was really struggling, and he was running harder and harder and harder. So I think Phillips was subbed out of the game because he was completely gassed. He was completely gone. So I don't criticise Clarkson for that, because he might have made even more of a mess of the Roos if Phillips was left out there to try and hang in there. Running at VFL intensity is one thing. Running at AFL intensity is a massive, massive jump up. Running at the intensity that Nick Dacos was running at is just something young Will Phillips would have never even dreamt about. So it's a great lesson for him, but it just proves how great Dacos is. His ability to impact the game late in that contest was absolutely sublime. Absolutely sublime. Some of the other guys who had a big impact, Darcy Cameron. Is he the best player or the best performed player in the competition that no one is talking about? He just continually backs back into packs, long down the line, takes marks. He doesn't jump off the ground. He just stays rock solid, eyes up at the footy, and marks the ball. He takes a lot of his marks by double grabbing and taking 3 bites at the cherry, but he gets it done week in and week out. He has to be admired the way he's gone about it. It was a great contest between he and Tristan Sherry. From the Roos point of view, Wardlaw and Davies Uniacke, they need to be acknowledged. I was begging for a tag. I was yelling out, Craig McRae, I don't think you're listening to AFL Nation whilst you're coaching the team. But if someone can yell out to him, tag Wardlaw, he is everywhere. He had the ball a dozen times in the first quarter. He kicked a goal. He ended up with 30 disposal, 10 score involvements, 6 clearances, 6 inside 50s, and a goal. You can give him the rising star as far as I'm concerned. And LDU, the man that must be re-signed at Arden Street, he was equally dominant. 31 disposals, 5 tackles, 10 score involvements, 7 clearances, and 8 inside 50s. He's basically impossible to tackle. He was getting the ball, looking at opponents in that first half and just running away from them. And he probably is the best running exit from stoppage player in the competition when he is on song. He just simply has to be retained. Has to be retained. And finally, I'll go there again to put an absolute bow on this one, an exclamation mark on this one. It should have been 50 metres. It should have been 50 metres. This week on the 7AFL socials, Brodie Grundy, BG for AA for the 3rd time. Brodie Grundy's the All-Australian ruckman, as far as I'm concerned. I know a lot of it is about Goulden, Heaney, and Warner, but I'm telling you now, Brodie Grundy has had a massive impact on this football club. His ability to win contests in terms of ruck contests in a dominant fashion, get after the ball, win his fair share of the ball. How often do you see him out down on hands and knees, getting after the opposition, getting after the ball? I've loved what he's done. He's the recruit of the year, and I think he's the All-Australian ruckman at this point. 31 disposals, 49 hitouts, if you don't mind. He is a star. Now, 2 things before we get out of here. The coaching move of the year. The coaching masterstroke of the year. The magnet move of the year. Toby Bedford of the GWS Giants, his season in 2023 was absolutely outstanding. Alongside Brent Daniels, those two, I think, combined to be the most dynamic, pressure, hard-working, small forward combo in the competition. Not a heap of goals between them, but their impact in games was absolutely enormous. Daniels has kicked on in 2024. He has had an injury or two, a bit of a concern here or there. But Bedford really stagnated in 2024, this season, I should say. And I know disposals aren't the only measure of impact, but last year Bedford had less than 10 disposals only 5 times from his 19 games. Across 13 games this year, so 6 less, he's already had 5 games with 10 or less. So his numbers have been down in almost every key metric when it comes to small forwards. And I think his place inside the Giants 23, certainly 22, had to be in some jeopardy. But this is where coaches do their thing. Now, I don't think many would have anticipated this, and I doubt the move actually was brought about from Adam Kingsley, the head coach. I reckon it would have been an assistant coach who thought of this. But Bedford can run. He's competitive. He can tackle. Why not go and play on Zach Butters? Why not? And what about it? Kept Butters, the superstar, to 17 disposals, frustrated him to the point where he threw a strike to an opposition player and copped a week for it. And Bedford managed 16 disposals and a goal himself. So arguably his biggest and most productive output for the season. So Bedford goes for 16 and a goal, plays on Butters, who only has 17 disposals. So what about that? I think it's the move of the year from the Giants coaching staff. Some coaches will cast players aside when they're out of form. The good ones get really inventive and they find a way for an impactful player to help the team. It's the old motto, how can I help you so you can help us? It was perfectly created by the Giants coaches, whether it was Adam Kingsley, whether it was one of his assistant coaches, I'm not sure. Pretty sure my old mate Benny Hart's up there. Maybe it was his idea. But Bedford to Butters was a great move, and I'm pretty sure it solidified Toby Bedford inside that Giants 22 for the near future. Finally, a little bit of a pop quiz. Without looking, don't reach for your phone, as I've done twice in this show. I want to know who the leading tackler is inside forward 50 in the competition. Quick, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Guess. Who is the leading tackler inside forward 50 this year? Could it be Lockie Schultz? Could it be Riley West, Bo McCreary, Nick Holman, maybe Charlie Cameron? Dylan Moore's been prominent. It's none of those guys, but it is a Hawk. It's not Jack Ginnivan. It's certainly not Nick the Wizard Watson. It's the most unlikely type of all. It's the former Tiger, the former Sun, Mabior Chol, the man that only, they say, kicks goals in general play. He has been absolutely immense this year. His form has been superb. He's been so competitive in the air without Mitch Lewis in the team for most of the season. He's competed hard. He's taken some contested marks. He's kicked truly because he is a sublime kick of the footy. But he leads the competition for tackles inside forward 50. He's got 25. Lockie Schultz is next. He's got 23. What about that, if you don't mind? He's kicked 20 goals from 12 games. And if Mitch Laws can get back in some form, then Chol can benefit even more so from copping the number 2 defender. So congrats to Mabior Chol. Deserves some love. The Hawks are up and about, and I'm up and about. Round 14 was super. We've got one more week of bye rounds, another handful of teams on bye, but can't wait for round 15 to get underway. Geelong and Carlton, if you don't mind, at the MCG. That'll be absolutely packed on Friday night. You can catch all of that live and free on Channel 7. My name's JJ. Thanks for following along. Make sure you do subscribe. Keep liking, keep commenting, keep engaging in the game we all love so much. Until then, we'll catch you next week.